All right, hi everyone. At the time of recording this, it's the end of May, so we're going to do a bit of a content roundup, and I'm going to show you what I've released since the last roundup. So this is mostly for the benefit of the patrons to keep track of their investment, if you like, but there will also be stuff in here across the different channels that you probably haven't seen as well. So since the last roundup, the first video that was put on the main channel was over here. I met the king of geometry nodes. This was a fun one where I sat down with Ben, aka Cartesian Caramel, who came to visit the UK. I showed them around London a bit. They came down to the home studio, and we basically had a bit of a chat. There is actually an extra bit of recording which hasn't been released from this time, but I've still got that sitting around in case I want to do something with it. A lot of you may be familiar with his live streams on his YouTube channel as well. There's a lot of really good geometry nodes content in there. Following on from that, I released amazing Blender art from the community. This was another video taking a look at Blender Artists, the website where people post their finished projects, work in progress, experiments, etc. It's just a nice one to share some work from the community. Then from here onwards, I started a new kind of format of video, essentially shifting a philosophy when it comes to making content, and I've spoken a bit more about this on the second channel, but we'll get to that. So here I was doing a semi-randomly selected workflow of picking an old file from my Gumroad via some random selection and then working on it. So the first one is a screen, a visual effect. It's based on an old experiment I did, but this time I was just improving it to make it easier to modify and use as integrated diegetic lighting in a scene. Then I had a look at the ambient grunge node, which had not been updated in a while. I made a subtle improvement to the pattern of the grunge and then made a decision of how I wanted to modularize it in the future. Now, at the time of recording this, that has been done. I need to record a quick video after this because version 5 is available, but that was that. And then I showed a couple of projects that were being worked on. So Ben and I were doing a crystal generator, and I was working on some kind of container house element pack. And then I added a little bit of a tip regarding the hex scatter product at the end of that. The next video, I was experimenting with scanning in one of my fossil samples and then using it to build an environment. At the beginning of the video, this was inspired by a project/product that I wanted to work on. I had an idea, but not a general direction, and it turned into a bit of an experimental art video by the end of it. Then from there, because relating back to this crystalline project, Ben wanted an environment to kind of display crystals in, I took this museum-like experimental one and built a kind of integrated display case. And it was an interesting video kind of showing you how even with just a vague idea, if you trust the process, you can come out with something interesting. And then the latest video in this batch, something I learned while working in Blender, is relating back to the ambient grunge one, where while working to modularize the nodes for the procedural material, I noted how there were two main approaches I would take that I would describe as the outside in and the inside out method. I started with the outside in. I wasn't happy with the results. I then shifted to the inside out method, and then it's finished. It's done and I'm happy with it. I also related that to modeling in this as well. I spoke about how when people start modeling in 3D, they oftentimes start from an outside in perspective, trying to nudge things into shape, but due to the limitations of modeling features, it's hard to transcribe that visual image down into tangible geometry. And that oftentimes in the quest for making something that looks cool, some people find that shifting that perspective to the opposite way, building a substructure and then outwards from there, gives them more to work with, essentially more opportunities to alter things in the process of going from idea to something actually tangible on the screen. So those are the videos from the last month or so. I'm not exactly sure when I put out the last roundup. So for other channels, Curt Studio is the second channel. We started from a long chat about long COVID, histamine, mast cells, and antibodies, where I spoke about one of my medical conditions. One that started in 2020 has now returned in 2025 after a Moderna vaccine. And I spoke about how, well, a lot of the things I've done research on, a lot of the theories relating to antibody molecular mimicry, stimulating mast cell disorders, reactions to diet, how COVID might do that, and speaking to doctors about things they've discovered during trials. Then I did a little preview video for that container house kind of element project. So this is before it was actually shown on the main channel. So that's something about the second channel as well. Sometimes I give previews before things appear in the main channel. Someone sent me a question asking about licensing for products, so I answered that in this one. And then I did a little exercise, a bit of a cognitive exercise, speaking about a confusing medical issue where a blue square specifically appears in the vision and doesn't really go away. So we were kind of discussing that and reports from other people and what it might be. Then a bit of a workflow video discussing scheduling content versus releasing it live. Then an update on my education, knowing that I'm working on my degree later in the year for biomedical sciences. Then I spoke a bit more about meeting Ben in a bit more detail for anyone that was interested. Another update education-wise, and the steps I'm taking at home to expand my home lab. I then spoke about my shift to working on slightly different type of content for YouTube, focusing more on what I want to make in the day-to-day, and again, why it's important not working for an algorithm. And then a huge achievement in the latest one, I've finally now been able to do something which I wanted to do for a long time, which is actually see my white blood cells under microscope. I expanded my my home lab to do staining. So again, I haven't even started my degree yet for biomed sciences, but it's already going well. Okay, also recently, I might have mentioned this before, I started another channel called Reference Board. So this one is for the kind of thing where we sit down and we look at references on PureRef and we discuss them, break them down into their constituent parts, how they might be helpful. We're also taking a look at art books, had a bit of an art book haul that I showed of some of the books which I picked up there because I've got a library of reference books, especially game art books, then a little bit of gameplay as well because we like to play through some games and talk about what we found. Oh, there was a third one that I was supposed to edit. I wonder where that went. Anyway, these are the lesser important channels, but it's just when I get some free time to give some people a bit more to enjoy and watch. Also, over the last month, the Parasocial Therapy podcast has begun. So it's got its own channel here. It's basically where we sit down and we talk to different creators. I interview them, ask them questions. They respond by text, so I read out their answers. And some of them are really kind of deep and comprehensive. I especially recommend the one by Agnew here. These are on Spotify as well if you want to listen. Again, it's another one of these side projects. When I find the free time, I put a bit of extra stuff out. Okay, for products and resources. So, like I mentioned earlier, the screen effect demo had been worked on in a recent main channel video. So the functionality has now extended. It's been changed from $1 to $3 to reflect the additional work put into it. If you want to learn more about what was done to it, then the main channel video is available. Ambient grunge has had its pattern improved. It's not reflected in the store image here because we need more updated store images. But again, on the main channel, there's information about that. Version 5 has been released, making the nodes more modular, which will make it easier to expand on in the future. So for patrons, over at curtisholt.online/members, where they can track their exclusive content, under the work in progress products and experiments, we've got 2 new additions. So we've got an early version of that container home project, like an early file, and this fossil scan environment test from the main channel video is also available. If you're signed into the patron and you're a member of the $5 tier and above, you can click on that link and it will take you there. And then finally, for those of you who are supporting me primarily from my education, and if you want to see how I contribute to humanity in the future if I do, this is the personal development section. So I finished a quite large course on virology, immunology, epidemiology, with a focus on COVID-19 and influenza A. That was really interesting. I learned a lot. I want to read back through it again. I've now moved on to other things. So right now I'm doing quite a chunky thing on histology and hematology, which is why I've expanded my home lab now with some equipment that allows me to do some home hematology, which is blood studies, by the way. It's been really interesting because over the last year or two, I really wanted to go over my fear of like blood finger pricking. And I kind of have. You might remember a project that barely anyone watched where I 3D printed like a little tool to do like self-pricking on the back. I still need to work on that. That's got some really cool ideas, but I've discovered that actually just pricking here is easier for me. And what that means is I can now study myself and I can look for leukemia. I can track my lymphocytopenia, my low kind of white cell count. I've learned how to do this through differential leukocyte counts, which is interesting. But learning how to prepare like microscope slides and analyze them has been cool. Yeah, I thought it would be something that was like way out of reach for me, but turns out I'm really clicking with it. I've also started courses on antibiotic resistance, autism, and general genetic function, and I like to dive into the immune system in more specifics. So a new computer has also been set up in the corner of the studio, which will serve as the dedicated lab computer. So while I'm there doing lab work, I can enter things in. And in regards to that, I can also feed in my microscope to that computer, and I've designed custom overlays, such as graticules and grids, and A markers that can help me to do the microscopy analyses. So that's the roundup for May. Thank you for watching the content, everyone, if you have been. Even if you don't watch everything, I just like to share everything I'm doing with you. I'm getting a bit more proactive with actually sharing things. Of course, if you want to help support me on Patreon, you can. You can even sign up for free on the Patreon, by the way. If you want to get like occasional post updates, I'm trying to do them less frequently. So like maybe once a month we'll do roundups. You'll get an email sent to you if you've got that activated for your Patreon. But of course, if you want to give some money, you can. And like we said, the $5 tier and above are getting some extra files available through curtisholt.online/members. So yeah, I think that's about it. If you made it this far through the video, put a unicorn emoji in the comments so I can see if you made it this far. And if you're wondering why it's a unicorn emoji, it's a reference to my 100k subscriber video where I was dressed up in a unicorn dressing gown. So it's become a bit of a running joke. So thanks for watching, everyone. I'll bring you more content soon. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.